This episode of Voices and Visions includes discussion of real-world themes explored in C.M. Alongi's work, including trauma, abuse, identity, and systemic issues. These topics are approached with care, but viewer discretion is advised.
Like, people appreciate honest effort, and as long as you keep approaching your research and this space as a student, understanding that you're never going to be a master at it, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, totally got that. Yeah, my very first book that I wrote, which is a little bit off topic here, but the very first book that I wrote really dealt with like true crime detective or police procedures, and I had to do some research on that because I had no knowledge of what that looked like. So I had somebody ask me, "Hey, how did you research those proceedings?" I said, a mix of media and research.
Yep. Yeah, no, and sensitivity readers are your best friends, especially for books. They will point out all the things that you got wrong before it ever hits the editor's desk. And even then, sometimes, Rick Riordan is one of my favorite authors. He is who I want to be when I grow up. I'm 30. I remember when he was promoting Chalice of the Gods.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there were new characters, so he had a new character arc that he was sharing on Instagram. And one of them was the minor deity Ganymedes, the bearer of the gods. And this elderly white cishet man captions this really well done character art of this handsome but very skinny man with meet Olympus's favorite himbo. And I opened up the comments, and every single comment I saw was some variation of Rick, hun, that's a himbo. No, sorry, that's not himbo. Sorry, Rick, hun, that's a winch. And even I'm getting the terminology wrong. And it's like, but has been making, he also has a ton of hugely diverse cast of characters across all of his books and series. And like, that's the worst mistake he's ever done when it comes to representing queer characters.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's the worst. That's the one thing you get wrong. Okay. Not an A plus, but you're still an A. You still did really, really well. Like, it's still something that people are gonna laugh about, but like in a good way. We're laughing with you, not at you.
Yeah. Did audience response? Well, I think you answered part of this. Did audience response influence how the series evolved over time?
Definitely. It's one of those things where it's like, yes, I do control these stories and this series, both the book and the TikTok series version. But at the end of the day, like, there is something about storytelling that is very collaborative. And with the dawn of the internet, that has become more and more obvious. And, I still do decide, things like, massive character arc, big betrayals and, who ends up with who. If you disagree with, who I've shipped characters with, I'll write a fan fiction. That's what that is for.
Yes.
But I was like, a year or so ago, I was getting a lot of comments of people wishing for a polyamorous relationship.
Oh,
And
okay.
this was around the time when Eric was introduced, but not Oscar.
Oh,
So I had
okay.
that in the back of my mind that, okay, this is a demand that, in the terms of supply and demand. People want healthy polyamorous portrayal, because every time polyamory is portrayed, especially on television, it usually falls apart. Either a character dies, or there's a betrayal, or like, it basically it's not healthy, it's toxic, it's just right. It's bad. So I'm like, okay, I can't really do that with the characters I have here, but I'm gonna keep it on in the back of my mind while I'm progressing with the series. So Eric has his big betrayal arc. And then I come up with a new character, Oscar, because like, okay, we had demons, now I want to explore angels, and
Hmm.
I want another character with an accent to better differentiate him from the others. And the only accent I can really reasonably do is a northern Minnesotan accent, which is just my accent but exaggerated. Um, and at the time, I was like, another issue that I have with romantic portrayals on screen is we never see older
Oh
relationships.
yeah.
Like a lot of times, if there's an elderly couple, like elderly couples, like usually are already a thing. When we see them, like we don't, they don't really get a romantic arc or plot. And if they do, one of them is usually dead, like right after. Right? We can't have old people happy and in love, right? That would
Right.
suck. So with those two things in mind, I'm like, okay, well, now I need both Oscar and now vet grandpa Andy to realize that they're not entirely straight. And then once we've done that, now I can have them, have all three of them be together. So I wanted an older romantic arc and then the polyamory supply. And um I had that kind of happen off screen because I'm not the best at writing romantic plots. Perks of being aromantic asexual. um, but it still very much happened, and they are now an established couple.
Yeah.
And I was really, really pleased with that. And that happened because fans asked for it. I very strongly believe in keeping the lines of communication open between creator and fan because that is, you know, from a cold-hearted marketing standpoint, that's the only way to ensure that you're delivering what people want.
Yeah.
Um, from a better perspective, it's how do I improve as a creator? You need feedback, you need constructive criticism, or you're never going to grow as a writer. Um, and then also, it's just really fun to see like what other people um, come up with, the ideas that they have that I would never have. And a lot of them don't make it into my stories or series, but a few of them do, and it's always really fun when that happens.
Yeah. That's actually what really that was actually really interesting to see. Because like prior to that, I had never met somebody who was in a throuple or in a polyamorous relationship or a polycule, as what they call it.
Hmm.
But then I realized some of my few of my mom's coworkers. It's like she told me, oh, they're in a throuple. I was like, oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things where it's like, the one person I know who isn't a polycule is I met at MarsCon. It's in fact multiple cons. He's one of those behind the scenes guys who's just in like puts on every convention, Convergence, MarsCon, MiniCon. He started his own con. What? My gloves tried to run away. Quantum Con. He's in just like every any convention that happens in the Twin Cities area, he's there. And I was saw him chatting with a gal at one of them. And after they talked, I approach him and I'm just like, so what was that about? Thinking correctly that there was some romantic tension happening. And he's like, oh yeah, no, that's such and such, and we're just negotiating polycule rules. And I'm like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, no, like I have like three partners, and some of them are in relationships with each other and with me, and some of them are in relationships with each other and not me, and stuff like that. I'm just like, oh, that sounds like so much work. Like I respect polycules and polyamorous people, like you do you. Um, I am very happy single. I'm just giving, I will be that crazy cat lady, crazy dog lady, in a couple of decades, and I cannot wait.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. At what point did you realize that Cafe Latte could expand beyond TikTok?
Fairly quickly. I think it was about a month into it where I'm just like, okay, like I'm now at the point where it always comes down to money, unfortunately. But after about a month, you know, TikTok was paying me a good chunk of cash
Uh,
as their monetization program. And then of course I started cross posting onto YouTube. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. Apologies. Cross posting onto YouTube that was also very steadily increasing it's paid towards me. So after after about a month of that, and I was still working on the Accidentally Kidnapped Kingdom of Starlight first draft that on my Patreon. I made a promise. I'm going to keep that promise. But as an author, I pretty quickly saw like, oh, I can turn this into some sort of novelization. Maybe cozy. I'm not a huge fan of cozy fantasy in written word, or at least doing that. So it's probably going to be a little more focused on the action adventure, the stuff I can't really do easily here on TikTok. Um, that it happened pretty quick. And then but I wanted to check to make sure that, fandom would still be there because the internet is forever, but it's also so I was still working food service and I'm like, okay, if I can maintain this, income for 3 to 6 months, I can quit my food service job and do this full time. And that's the point where I'm going to know I need to do a series on this too. And once you know it, 3, 4, 5 months pass and I'm growing on TikTok, on YouTube. And on top of that, in fact, I was even at the point where I could, instead of working 25 hours a week, 25 to 30 hours a week over at Briano's, I started pulling back. I went down to like 20 to 25 hours a week for a couple of weeks. And then, more fucking YouTube and Instagram growth. And I was like, okay, let's go to 15 to 20 hours a week. Still growing, still paying my bills on time. Now I actually have a savings account. Holy shit. Like I can actually start looking forward to a future of not living paycheck to paycheck. And I was fully transparent with my managers and my coworkers over what was going on and why I was doing this. So they knew that I was going to quit at some point fairly soon. And by the time I got down to like 5 to 10 hours a week, they had to hire like 3 other people to do my job. So, my job. And I turned in my 2 week notice on August 5th, 2023, my birthday. It was my birthday present to myself. And that was around the time I was like, I was still working on Accidentally Kidnapped, I think, the manuscript, but I was thinking like, okay, how do I want to do the book version of this? Like, how do I want to do that? At first it was like a dual timeline type of thing where like we were seeing, you know, Bob slash Violet, realizing that, oh, the kingdom that I'm a princess of is wrong to enslave all of humanity. So here are all the steps I'm going to take to not do this. So that kind of redemption arc. At the same time, we have JC mirroring it, with her own redemption arc in the modern day and trying to get Bob back from being kidnapped. But then I was just like, okay, first of all, way too much shit going on. Second of all, I'm not going to disrespect the Fae realm by giving it half of a book. Like it needs to be its own thing. And then it's going to be a series and this is going to be self-published. So like I have all the time in the world. I don't need to cram everything into like the opening book. So it took a few drafts, and the first horrible draft was on Patreon. It's still up there. It's god awful. I realized halfway through, like, I'm going to need to rewrite this whole thing. And I told my patrons that too. And they were like, yeah, we can see that, but we're still enjoying ourselves. That was really fun. Putting a first draft online for people to see, even behind a paywall, is terrifying. I did that with Accidentally Kidnapped and Heart of Iron because, frankly, I needed the money.
Mm-hmm.
But it is really cool to like pull back the curtain and like share like, okay, this is kind of what's going on, what my thoughts are, why I'm doing this, why I'm not doing it this way, why books take so long to create and all that jazz. So I won't say that was collaborative. They were basically more just my sounding board or rubber duck that I'm like, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if JC did that? What if Nicole said, oh, no, okay, now I got it. I'm still going to give you guys this terrible first draft, but just note that 90% of it is not
So the evolution of CaFae Latte eventually led to Heart of Iron, bringing that world into long form storytelling. You actually answered most of the questions that I had on here, and that's kind of a good thing. So I guess one question that I one question that I did have. Well, first question was for those who don't know what Heart of Iron is all about. What's the plot line to that story?
Heart of Iron is basically a darker rewrite of First Visit CaFae Latte. Think Marvel Comics versus Marvel Cinematic Universe. We got the same characters, most of the same basic world building rules. I made Bob Violet a little less powerful. She can't just curse anyone who walks into her cafe. She needs their full name or a piece of their body or DNA.
Mm.
And I also made Nicole more powerful. In the TikTok series, Nicole does not start out as a witch. We see her start that journey and then grow more powerful and learn over the course of the 3 years it's been. In the book, she's already an established, powerful, learned witch. Divine. She's very good at divination. She's got clairvoyance, good luck charms. She's kind of a juggernaut, which is really fun. And then JC was also a bit different. It's the same basic character, but TikTok JC is a college dropout and has been sober for 6 years. Book JC is a high school dropout and has been sober for 2 months.
Mm.
They're in fact still on parole. And while TikTok JC has like stuff happening in juvie, they've been to juvie,
Mm.
didn't have a great childhood and stuff. JC, it was juvie, jail, and prison, for a murder charge.
Ooh.
Back when they were doing drugs and stuff. Yeah, no, and 2 months sober, also 2 months out of jail and out of prison, I should say. And they're living at the group home. They're on parole. They have a parole officer. They're navigating this new job and this new relationship while having all these problems. So it was like a bit of a excuse me, bit of a look at just how harshly we treat our criminals, even the ones that are like trying to do better. We just make it so harder for them to redeem themselves. Um, which is not great. So, there's that. To actually answer the question though, Cyrus is the same, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no change. Um, but basically to answer the question in terms of plot, it is Stacy gets this new job at CaFae Latte. They start a relationship with one of the regulars. It's going great. They're working on themselves, and then their boss, Violet, gets kidnapped by some of her old enemies from the Fae realm, who want to drag her back and punish her for betraying her country and liberating the enslaved humans that her royal family had, you know, exploited for their own gain. So JC and Nicole and Cyrus have to go and to rescue her, while Bob herself is trying to talk her captors out of doing this because the main villain here is her former protege. You know,
Oh.
basically her Cyrus before Cyrus. Cyrus of the Fae realm is who Red Wolf is, but without the humor.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. So like the big themes of the book, with Violet and JC, it's what does it look like to redeem yourself? Who decides that? What happens if what you've done is considered irredeemable? Do you even try to do that? Violet has a bit of a crash out near the end as like her method to escape. She's like, I did the right thing. You don't get to punish me for that. Whereas Red Wolf was like, you killed my wife. So yeah, I do. Actually get to punish you for that. It's like, and you mean the wife who was fighting to enslave humans? That wife? Okay. But it's like, it's safe. And so basically, she tries to talk him out of it, and then she tries to escape non-violently, and then she has a little bit violently, and then when it gets to the point where he's not going away and he's actively, she doesn't mind him threatening her, but she's like, this is my mess. I made this monster, basically. You want to target me, that's fine. Once he starts targeting other people, that's when she kind of has this crash out of just like, if you are going to treat me as a monster, even when I do everything in my power not to be, then why should I stop acting monstrally? And that's kind of the theme of it is just like, you know, people can and do redeem themselves, But if everyone around them is going to keep treating them like a criminal or a monster, at some point they're going just going to decide, okay, I guess I'm a criminal and monster forever. If you're not going to let me be anything else, I won't be anything.
Yeah, that's actually pretty. That's actually really interesting. There's like so much effed up nonsense that
I
I'm
know,
gonna have to
right?
like dive into if I get Heart of Iron. That's gonna be the first thing I'm probably gonna do.
Ask your local library if you can't. And I understand that a lot of my fan base, especially in today's economy, cannot afford to purchase a physical or even an ebook copy of it. It's also available on audiobook. Ask your local library. They can order it for you and then rent it out to you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll definitely have to
Yes,
do that.
physically and digitally.
How do you preserve the original tone of a story while allowing it to grow into something larger?
It mostly rests on the characters. I do very character driven stories, no matter the tone. So while this is, Heart of Iron is technically CaFae Latte fan fiction, is it fan fiction if I created book? I don't. At the end of the day, it's still the same characters. Maybe they're a little rougher, like their circumstances are such that they have to be a little bit rougher, especially Jennifer Jones.
Mhm.
But JC is still JC, Nicole is still Nicole, Bob is still Bob, this is still Cyrus. Caroline and Andy are still care. Like Yarn Granny is
Yeah.
there. Um, they're just. I mean, if you have the characters being the characters, then like that is goes a long way to preserving the tone. It also does help that, like again, I hate sad endings. I don't do tragedies. Everything I write has, if not a happy ending, then at least a hopeful ending. And that also does go a long way to preserving the tone because no matter what crap I put these characters through, they're always going, most of them at least, are always going to push their way through and they're always going to end the book at least better than they started.
Yeah. So, while that work centers around the fantasy sphere, your work also moves into the science fiction sphere, like Citadel, which centers on a very different kind of perspective. So,
Yep.
you mentioned the main protagonist, Olivia, is nonverbal autistic, from what I understand. What drew you to tell this story through a nonverbal protagonist?
So, fun fact, Citadel is basically the end result of the story I've been writing since I was 12.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and yeah, and these days I hesitate to say that because of the whole Age of Scorpius drama that happened. But yeah, no, the first full story that had a beginning, middle, and end that I wrote when I was 12. And it was 300 pages of total shit that I made my poor father read. And he did, and he left me notes. Um, it's one of those things where like, it's very different, but like Olivia was still there. She was just a side character. And as I rewrote and revised and rewrote and revised this story throughout my high school and college years, um, turning it from like an animal centered one where like Olivia was basically the only human in this story centered on animals because it was basically thinly veiled warriors fanfic. That was the series with cats. Um, I've ever replaced cats with wolves. And then I made it into a post-apocalypse, and then Star Trek: The Alternate Original Series got big, and I turned it into a sci-fi story that takes place on a super planet. And then my first job outside of college, um, it was with this organization called Dungarvan. I was a community support staff, which is basically a job coach plus PCA for adults with disabilities. And in addition to a bunch of other stuff, usually cognitive issues, maybe some mobility and physical issues, quite a few of my clients were. I also have a couple of autistic cousins. I dated a couple of autistic guys. So it's always kind of been on my periphery. But when I was revisiting this novel again and rewriting it again, um, and I had like the flooded forest all set up, and I was rebuilding the town of Citadel to better match Olivia, who by this point had migrated into becoming the main character, I realized a question that is very valuable for authors to ask is how can I make this more difficult for my character? What hoops do I have to make them jump through? And then what hoops can I make them jump through to get those hoops? Um, that's how you get plot. And I realized that, okay, Olivia is basically playing the role of diplomat here, which to most people is something that requires empathy and people skills, right? Well, what if I made that very difficult for her? What if I took away her people skills, or at least the natural stuff that the natural skills that neurotypical humans typically have? And then in the next breath, I realized, what if I made her nonverbal autistic? So it's even harder for her. So it was a plot decision, but the more I created, world built and created her and sent it out. And the more I wrote the manuscript, the more I'm like, oh yeah, this is the right decision. It's dramatic. It's, it does help with the plot. But it also adds more depth to this character that I've known since I was 12. She, even when she was, you know, officially a soldier or a student or like, whatever, she's always had a scientific mind. She's always been an outcast, an outsider. She's always been blunt to the point of like insult almost. Um, Making her autistic didn't really change all that much about her, honestly. And then, as I mentioned, I made the author's note where I mentioned if I got anything wrong, let me know. Most of the emails and DMs that I got from people um, who are autistic and or ADHD were like, "Oh, I love Olivia so much. This is great." They did have a slight bone to pick with the nonverbal part of her because they were like, it just
Mm.
doesn't make sense with her age and other abilities. But the vast majority of them who did point that out were like, have you looked into mutism? Because that is a separate condition that does actually make sense given her past traumas. And it just fits better. And I looked into that for the sequel, Demon's Nest, and I'm like, yeah, that does psychologically fit better with everything. Um, so in the sequel, she actually does start to speak aloud. Um, but it, she says all of two words, literally, out loud, because at this point she has telepathy. Why would she use anything else? And also, Citadel doesn't really have a whole lot of speech therapists or psychiatrists.
Mhm.
Like so for her, there's no real need, and even if there was, there's like no real way that I can like get help with it, at least professionally. And again, telepathy, really handy. So it's one of the things where it's like, yeah, no, this is where the whole communal storytelling thing falls into play, where it's like, I made a small goof here, got feedback, sequel, we're hopefully doing it better.
Yeah. And also, like, telepathy is, like, a very useful power, because especially if you want to talk shit about someone you don't like.
Exactly. And like for her, it's like she has a really hard time figuring out people's emotions.
Hmm.
Like just reading their body language and facial expressions, like it takes her a minute to figure it out if she puts in the effort to like determine what's going on. But with they just get that emotion like, oh, this person's angry. I don't really know why they're angry, but they're angry and I can tell that just from our mental connection. So now I just need to figure out why they're angry and then maybe
Yeah. What's interesting is that Citadel was nominated for a Minnesota Book Award.
fix.
What did that mean to you?
So I didn't realize that I didn't even know the Minnesota Book Award was a thing. Like I nominated for it. That sad. But it was really great, especially since like that's my debut novel. Like that was like the first thing that got a publishing contract and was published out in the world with my name. And so it's like, wow, okay. Um, really giving people high expectations for the sequel. Hope I don't trip over that bar and fall. Um, but it was really great, and it was really a great celebration of other Minnesota authors. I also knew right out the gate that I was not going to get it because I saw that I was going up against Inkblade Sister Scribe, and I'm just like, nope, no way. That's the one that's going to get that award, and I was right. But I did get to meet that author, Emma Torres, absolute sweetheart. She actually is Professor at McAllister, which is where my brother went to college. It's just down the street from Hamlin. And my brother's ex-girlfriend, they met and broke up in college, and they're still friends. She's part of our D&D group. She took some of Emma's classes. And so when I announced that and was like, any of my friends and family want to come to the ceremony, and Linnea was like, gosh, I actually went to Professor Torres' classes. I'm like, I'll get you a ticket and you can like chat with her again. And it was really fun, and it was really cool to chat with other authors from Minnesota, and uh, celebrate our work and see Emma win. I know I wasn't gonna win. My parents were like, when I'm like, I'm definitely not. Like, I just know I'm not. I think I broke that day too, so the whole day sucked.
Yeah, but like that's like a big milestone to get just be nominated for an award. That's pretty big in and of itself.
Yeah, no, especially since like Minnesota, outside of New York City, is the publishing capital of the United States.
Yeah.
We have more publishing, we have more publishing companies and authors than almost any other state. Again, outside of New York. And that's because like we do in the winter. We get snowed in, and then in the summers it's boiling hot. So it's like either do cosplay, art, or story
Yeah.
time. But yeah, no, and that is now a thing that I have on my bios, and it is just really, it is just an honor to have, and great indication of how the rest of my career is going to go. But at the same time, like, and this was what was really messing with my head while writing the sequel. It's like, oh, I now have expectations.
Oh.
Like when you're doing your first novel, there are no expectations. Nobody knows you exist.
Yeah.
So you can kind of do whatever you want. And then once you hit those expectations, once you have that fan base, then it's just like, oh, what if they don't like this one? What if I go through like this?
Oh God, I'm the
I
same.
kind,
I am the same way.
yep. I kind of felt that with Heart of Iron, especially because I'm like, so many people are here for like 90% of my fandom is here because of CaFae Latte. So book, like that's gonna have problems. But it's one of the things like intellectually, I know, you know, not everyone's going to like everything you write. Um, and even if you are an internationally celebrated best-selling author, you're gonna sometimes put out shit. I mean, Stephen King has published books that he is not proud of and said that they suck. Um, and that doesn't stop him from being Stephen King,
Yeah.
So you can put out crap sometimes, and that's okay. And so long as it's you and not AI stuff, um, it's all fine. And everyone kind of has you know, there is some grace, and I'm lucky enough to have a fandom that if I were to put out something that's absolutely terrible, they'd be like, "Oh, you were having an off day. It's fine. We'll go back to rereading Heart of Iron until you get back on your feet."
Yeah. Another thread that runs through your work is how you explore power and the cost of surviving within those systems. And that is, hold on one second. Yeah, my parents were checking in on me. Another thread that runs through your work is how you explore power and the cost of surviving within those systems, and that is the witch who trades with death.
Mm-hmm.
For those who aren't familiar with it, could you give us the premise of it?
Rape recovery with necromancy,
Yeah.
basically. Longer version is that Tana has been a concubine to an evil emperor for like 6 years, and she accidentally finds out that, oh, he is immortal and he has all these weird necromancy powers because he has been selling pieces of his soul to death for those powers, like the actual incarnation of death. Um, and so she figures this out and realizes that, oh, I can do this too and escape and get the hell out of here, which is what she does. She gets as far as this mountain town of Cahuta on the other side of the mountain range. couple of kingdoms away from the evil emperor. And then she basically runs out of money and is like, I have no way to cross the tundra without some gold and uh, allies, friends, expertise, which I do not have. So she gets a job in food service and, and tries to save up for that. And then, of course, the emperor finds out where she is and launches a full scale invasion to try to get her back, and also the rest of the area around her. And she is basically forced to, have that, do I run as I have been doing, run away from this nightmare, or do I find this place? And at that point, she has friends, and she has started to build this community in this town. And they're like, "Oh, we're fighting! Like we're a warrior people. This is what we're here for. Like we guard this mountain pass from invaders. This is our time to shine." And so she's just like, oh. And that's basically what that whole thing is, she is recovering from her trauma, and building a community for herself while also facing the source of that trauma and that pain. Um, and at the same time, she is making very similar deals as the emperor, trading bits of her soul to death. But well, he was doing it for, you know, immortality and power and, to heal himself and all that stuff. She was doing it to heal others, and to like bring back her own loved ones and stuff like that. Um, and she's still losing pieces of herself, but she's very careful about it. Um, it's mostly like memories that she's sacrificing, but she is very aware of the parallels, and she's like, I don't want to be this monster. And as her friends and family, figure out what's going on with her as well, they're just like, yeah, don't do that. Like if I die, let me stay dead, please. Like I'm 80 years old, fine. Um, and so it's kind of a discussion of like, what does it mean to have a good death? Like what point? Oh, you're frozen.
Oh, I'm
You're
frozen?
frozen. Hmm.
Oh, it looks like you're frozen on my end. Let's
If
see.
this is still being recorded,
Oh, yeah, it's
am
still
I
being
being
recorded.
okay?
Thankfully, Zoom will save audio and video as separate files.
Okay, good. Like you were frozen for like a solid
Oh,
20 seconds
no.
there, and I was just like waiting for this. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay, so yeah, but yeah, no, so it does go like, obviously death is a theme. We don't really go into huge discussions about it, but like it's one of those things where it's like it's there and you just kind of got to deal with it. And the fact of the matter is, Kana, the main character, and a bunch of her friends are very comfortable with the idea of death. They're just like, it's a thing. We don't want to deal with it until we're, old and gray and wrinkled, but we will. And if we die in battle, we die in battle. If we die of old age, we die of old age. Whereas the evil emperor cannot deal with.
Yeah. What role does death play across your storytelling?
So death is just a fact of life. Um, in the Witcher Trades of Death, they're a neutral entity. They're trading, they're giving power to the evil emperor, knowing that he's going to do horrible things with it. They're also making deals and trades with Kana too, and kind of helping her out as well. Um, they just are. In Citadel, we never meet personification of death, but it's still very present. Olivia is still dealing with the grief of losing her boyfriend for this war a year before the story starts. Riley is constantly hounded by death because of his health issues and the fact that he's in an abusive home and also committing heresy under the governor's nose, so which does have a death sentence. Um, it's just there. In Heart of Iron, it's interesting because like there are so many immortal champions, and the fairies of my world, in Heart of Iron, they really drive home the fact that we are deathless, we are above death, and that's what makes us better than humans and mortals, and why they should serve us. Like they don't want anything to do with, like they fight wars, but they're like, but we're not going to be soldiers. Like that's what humans are for. Like that's why they're kidnapping and taking humans and bringing them to the Fey realm is to fight their battles for them, literally. And it's always like it's okay to for mortals to kill mortals. It's not great, but understandable if an immortal kills a mortal. Usually better to have your executioner do that though, but you never kill an immortal. Like, and in fact, Red Wolf has a very strict no kill policy. The villain of Heart of Iron does not kill ever. It's just like that's just against his code. He does a bunch of other horrible stuff, and he also hires mortal mercenaries to do some killing for him if it can't be avoided. But that's just ingrained in their culture as just like, this is what separates us from them. And it's also what separates Violet, from the other Fae, is that, when she enlisted in the military, instead of, being in the background with a bunch of the other officers, she's like, no, 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 I need to know what's going on the front lines. Bring me to the front lines. Like, I'm gonna be messy. I'm going to take lives. I'm gonna do what my soldiers are doing so I can understand what they're dealing with and better my strategy around that. And that made her something of an outsider among other Fae soldiers because she was doing things that, like, she was facing death head on in a way that all the other fairies and immortals were so uncomfortable with. But that's also why she has so much empathy for humans, because she's like, oh wow, you guys deal with this like every day, much, and there's always that voice in the back of your head. Sometimes you can ignore it, but sometimes you can't. That's like you're gonna die soon. Maybe it's gonna be tomorrow. Maybe it's gonna be 100 years from now, but it's gonna happen. And that shapes her relationships and Cyrus as well. That shapes their relationships with all the people around them.
Yeah. So obviously your stories don't really shy away from difficult subject matter. Like with The Witch Who Trades with Death, it mentions like sexual abuse and trauma. How do you approach those elements with care and intention?
So I definitely lucked out in that, although I myself have never had to deal with that,
Mm-hmm.
I did volunteer at a rape crisis center for a while.
Oh wow,
So, excuse me,
you're good.
I was very conscious of like just how triggering this could be to a third of my femme audience, at least. And so basically a big problem that media has with sexual assault and abuse is that they put it on screen or on the page explicitly, mostly for shock value, or to really drive home the point that, this happened and this is horrible thing, but you don't need to do that. So in Kana's case, it's one of those things where like it happens off page.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely happens. There is no denying that. There's no even strong implication. Like, no, no, it happened. But we don't need every sordid detail. Like,
Yeah,
we
no
just
way.
need to know this is a thing that happened that she's been dealing with for 6 years. Um, and here's how she's been coping with it. Moving on. Um, that's basically all you need. The focus is not her trauma and pain, it's her healing and recovery. That is kind of the secret, where it's like the whole arc, as soon as she leaves the palace, her whole arc is centered on, you know, dealing with the, coming to terms with healing, um, realizing just how courageous and brave she actually is. She spends the entire book thinking she's a coward. And literally everyone around her is just like you defied the emperor for she was sneaking birth control, which is illegal. Because she's like, I can't stop this guy from assaulting me, but I can make sure he doesn't get a kid on it, which is the whole reason he was doing that.
Yeah.
And just all that stuff. So like her arc is finding her courage, and also healing. There is an explicit spicy scene in The Witcher Trace of Death, but it is consensual, and it is with her love interest, and that was really their like a marker of like, here's how far she has
Yeah.
and the healing that she has done so far. And there are some things she can't do, and she explicitly says, I can't do full penetration. I'm sorry, like that's a no go for me. And he's like, that's fine. There are other ways. and, and so the negotiation with that, um, and it basically just it's acknowledging that these horrible things do happen and not shying away from the fact, but you don't glory in it.
Hmm.
Um, so again, the focus is on the healing and the recovery. And the fact of the matter is, like I said, about a third of the entire femme woman population in America has been sexually assaulted.
Hmm.
Um, so they deal with this uh, and they have that healing process. And I have been contacted by real life survivors who've been like, I very much hesitated to read this because of this, and I put trigger warnings and um so I don't want to catch anyone off guard. But they've thanked me for sharing it and dealing with it in a compassionate way. It's not. I try not to write with an editor in my head. I don't want. I write for me and what I enjoy to read and write and create. But in this case, I did have something of an editor in my head of just like, okay, if a survivor picks this up, is this going to trigger them? And if the answer was yes, or probably cut it out, rewrite it, do something else. And if the answer was no, or probably not, or maybe they should check with their therapist before and after, then that felt safe enough to keep it there.
Yeah. So let's bring everything together. Across your work, what idea or question do you find yourself returning to most often?
Depends on the work, honestly. Um, it I am a very firm believer in the idea of positive change on a personal, societal, and global level. I want to be able to say that by the time I left this world, I did everything in my power to make it better. Even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just, impacting a handful of people's lives for I want to be able to say I did everything in my power to make queer relationships and queer identities more visible and understandable to the mainstream. I, you know, have produced more powerful femme characters for girls to look up to that I didn't really get when I was a kid. Um, I want to be able to say that I brought awareness to these real issues that are impacting millions of people every day and started a conversation about that or like influence people to donate. Um, whenever I do Kickstarters for my self-published stuff, I usually have a charity angle. In fact, today I swung by Family Wise and CaFae, Communities Advancing the Prosperity for Immigrants, and dropped off their checks for $5,000 each from the Monstrous Kickstarter. And that ends up so that philosophy of even if it's not a big change, I still do want to say that I produced at least some small positive changes in my lifetime, and that very much defines a lot of my writing. I think because even if it's not necessarily conscious, I think it's just addressing real problems, but still leaving people with hope. I There's a reason as much as I respect, I don't really like books like 1984 because what's the point? Like, yes, these are real problems, and yes, this life sucks, and yes, this type of dystopia would be terrible. Okay, how do we fix it?
Yeah.
How do we prevent that from happening, George? And it's just like, it's one of the reasons why I don't really have, and I understand, like, yeah, it has its place in the world, and like, yeah, there are some people who like are motivated by such drudgery and tragedies and stuff like that. I'm not one of them. I need to at least see that, okay, what is the path forward? Like, what is the plan? what are some things that we can do now, even if they're small? And I think that's what influences and is the question that just determines a lot of my writing, which is just like, okay, here's a problem, and here's something you can do to help, or here's another thing that you can do to help, or even just, have an open mind and, try to get through life with a smile.
Yeah. What kinds of stories do you feel um, that many genres still need more of?
Um, we're working on it, but definitely more diversity. And these especially more nuance. I know that, media literacy is kind of dying, especially here in America.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we do need nuanced characters. Um, and we definitely do need more diverse voices. And I know that, as a white woman here, it's just like, I hope we do more diversity. Like, yeah, okay, like that's okay. But own voices especially. I'm not gonna be the type of person to gatekeep to say like, you can't write, queer characters if you're not queer. Like I'd be a major hypocrite if I did that or anything. But more well researched diverse characters, I think, and that's across all storytelling. It's not as big of a problem in books. Anyone who's willing to crank out 300 pages and revise them and edit them and revise them and edit them again and again and again is probably going to be the type of person to do their research and have sensitivity readers as well. Um, but with movies and television, really need to work on that. It's getting better.
Yeah.
Sinners came out recently, last year and was an absolute smash, and for good reason. And you could see like with their in the credits just all of the experts they consulted on every, like the Korean American history, and several Black consultants, and just like historical consultants, and just like they did everything in their power to get as many voices, like real life voices, on this set, so that way they could um, more accurately and compassionately and authentically represent them. And I just wish we saw more of that effort
Yeah.
in Hollywood and everywhere else stories are told.
Yeah, definitely. If someone is discovering your work for the first time, where would you recommend they begin?
It depends entirely on their taste. If you are a sci-fi nut, Citadel is what you want. If you are from spicy book talk, The Witcher Trades with Death. It has exactly one explicit scene, and it is the only explicit scene that I have published to date. Um, so that's your one. You get. Um, if you want more wide, epic fantasy, there's Witcher Trades with Death, and then there's also Blackwing, which does have darker stuff, but it's not as dark as Witch. Um, and it is more action adventure based. And then if you like paranormal, urban, crazy fantasy, the Iron.
All right. Before we wrap up, I got a quick lightning round for you. So say the first thing that comes to your mind. Favorite folklore creature?
Faye, fairy.
A myth people misunderstand.
um, Perseus and Medusa.
Interesting. Coffee or tea?
See,
A character you'd trust the least.
oh God. It depends. What do you mean by like with my life or with my snacks? Because if with my snacks, Cyrus.
It could be either.
Yeah, I trust Cyrus with my life and liberty, but not with my snacks. The snacks will be gone.